Hello. Do I want to? I'm thinking about removing this from here and then moving my lights over here so the light is more direct. But I think this should be fine. Um, hello. My name is Brenda Chimsel. I am a self-proclaimed applied philosopher. I do philosophical analysis and understanding of things that we experience in society as human beings. Today, I want to talk about the philosophy of Christianity. I'm feeling a little bit shy just because I've been recording videos on here since November, but I've just started making my videos public in the last couple of weeks. And I wasn't expecting anyone to really watch them. I haven't really got that many views on the videos that I have posted so far, but someone that I know reached out to me about the video, one of the videos that I posted, and it's just making me just a little bit self-conscious because I'm like, oh, people are actually watching this. But I'm just gonna try and retain the confidence that I had when I was talking before and just get on here and record. I'm on a mission right now to just record a video every day. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, philosophy of Christianity. So I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian for my entire life. I was born into Christianity. Both of my parents are Christian, as in African. Well, there are a lot of Africans who are Muslim, but born into the Christian side of African descendants. And I made the decision on my own that I wanted to follow Jesus when I was 5 years old. So grew up in this. It's always been personal for me. And I've learned a lot since I turned 18 when I started trying to be more intentional about engaging with my faith, about what exactly is this thing that we call Christianity. And I know that it's very like there's because it's so cultural and like ingrained in the history of society, there's a lot of baggage that comes with the word Christianity and the understanding of it in terms of people who claim it and use it for whatever means or ends, positive or negative, or people who have experienced primarily negative or what they feel like are incoherent uses of Christianity and have a problem with it. I'm not going to be getting into all of that because that is primarily cultural, historical, and political. I am here to talk about philosophy. um, I do understand that and political. I primarily want to talk about the foundations of where Christianity even came from and like the philosophical foundations of it. This is obviously what I believe and what I have understood from the things that I have researched over the past couple of years and just being a Christian and reading the Bible, where I have landed as one individual out of billions. However, I am aligned with millions of people on this perspective that I have. Excuse me. Okay, so where did Christianity even come from? The entire basis, again from my understanding, the entire the entire basis of Christianity is um, the resurrection of Jesus. Now, we don't necessarily have any direct evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. I genuinely don't know how you would get direct evidence for that. But what we do have is the testimony of the witnesses to some extent. Basically, yeah, the testimony of the people that witnessed Jesus die and then saw him alive later, or the testimony of the people who were around and heard about his death and were and then later on saw him alive walking around. We get into the whole historical analysis of all that. I haven't done a lot of research about that. Again, I'm just doing philosophy, but we need to understand where this thing even comes from. It is grounded in a historical phenomenon, either the actual resurrection, like bodily resurrection, material resuscitation of the dead body of Jesus, or the lives of the people who claim that they saw this dead body back alive. So the entirety of Christianity is based on this claim that this person that was killed came back to life. That that is the foundation on which everything else Everything else is built. And so then the people, when they see this body, person resuscitated and back to life, obviously he's teaching them things. They followed him for years and they heard the things that he was saying. And like he's teaching them, he's talking to them, he's explaining things. They're confounded, they're confused, they don't understand what's going on. And they're trying to make sense of how in the actual world does a dead person come back to life? That doesn't make sense. How does that happen? And I think the explanation that they arrived at is that this person is God. That's the only way. Like there is an external force that this material manifestation has access to that none of us have ever had access to allow them to come back to life. There will be maybe Christians who argue that they knew he was God before Jesus was God, before all of this. I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think that the resurrection solidified it, and anybody around him that was doubting or that didn't know that was following him knew because of the resurrection and the witness and the testimony of the witnesses that went around talking about the resurrection. And I think that event fundamentally transformed like the people that followed him and that saw him back alive forever, to the point that they dedicated the rest of their lives to talking about this, to teaching people the things that they had learned, to explaining what the resurrection means, to the point of death from a lot of them and persecution for a lot of them. And I think we have to ask ourselves. This is one of the common arguments when we're talking about the historical basis for belief in the resurrection. Why why did they endure like this much? Why did they endure severe persecution, which we see talked about a lot in the writings of the New Testament? But also we know historically that Christians were persecuted in the Roman Empire because they didn't believe in the Roman gods. And so why are they like willing to why are they willing to endure this? I mean, one argument maybe could be that sorry, there's noise outside. One argument could be that Jewish people specifically had been like used to had been under oppression for hundreds of years at this point, and they're used to holding on to their identities and their beliefs despite the oppression that they face. So them enduring this type of oppression was actually not that big of a deal. You can make that argument. I don't know like what the historical facts is in terms of like Jewish people experiencing oppression for their beliefs, and if there was a certain point at which they just decided to convert to be like to the Roman like philosophies and ways of life. I don't know. We could talk about that. But I think another important thing is also that these people were not just persecuted by the Romans, but they were also persecuted by their own people, the Jewish community. And you see that articulated in the New Testament by, yeah, the New Testament authors. The primary persecution, I think the primary persecution that is talked about in the New Testament letters is persecution from their own people, their own ethnic group, isolation, being excluded, but also being beat by religious leaders and being sent into Roman legal authorities for causing disruptions and political disruptions. So, this event, the resuscitated body of this man that they saw die, how did they then interpret it? What did they believe that it meant? Okay, so this is where we start getting into the philosophy of it. I don't necessarily have all of this like written down, so I don't know how it's going to come out in articulation. But from my understanding, they believe that seeing this man resurrected meant that they too were going to experience resurrection, that death was no longer the final word on this experience that we call being alive, and that we're going to be able to have another chance at life. That is like speaking physically and materially, that there's going to be a physical resurrection, a physical resuscitation, a continuation of life beyond the decay and the breaking down of our bodies. But there's also a metaphysical aspect to this as well. They understand all evil and bad in the world to come from a singular source, maybe, or an oppositional force to what they would call God, which is all things good, all things perfect, all things whole, all things complete, all things in correct alignment. And that opposing force, you could either call the devil, you could call it demons, opposing spiritual forces. And this worldview doesn't isolate the metaphysical from the physical world or the non material from the material world. They see the same forces underlying everything. And if we see that this person has conquered death, the, the belief is that this person has defeated death, they overcame death, and they're showing us a way that, and an experience that we're going to have in the future. It also means that if they could overcome this aspect of the opposing force of good, then they have overcome all aspects of the opposing force of good. So, not just things that we experience physically, like death and sickness, but also negative spiritual things or emotional things or mental things that we experience, which they call sin. So sin is not just a like moral category of things that you do that are bad. From a philosophical and historically grounded and traditional understanding of Christian philosophy, sin is a corruption of goodness, and goodness are things. Goodness describes things that are rightly oriented towards their intended goal. Um, God. I hope this is making sense. I'm like literally coming up with this on the spot. So sin is not just things that you do that are bad, but sickness is also a result of sin. Death is a result of sin. Just chaos and dysfunction is a result of sin, or this negative opposing force to all that is good, perfect, complete, whole, and rightly aligned. And so the fundamental Christian understanding is that all of those things have been overcome by Jesus. And in aligning yourself with Jesus, you too will overcome those things. And Jesus, in overcoming those things by proof of his resurrection, has made it available for the rest of creation and has started has set the clock on overcoming sin and death and evil and decay and all of these other things. And we as humans have the ability to actually choose to align ourselves with that and start experiencing parts of that restoration and resuscitation of life while before our deaths. So we're gonna die, okay? We're gonna die. But because we saw Jesus rise from the dead, we have a hope that we are going to come back alive again. But it also gives us hope for things that we experience now in this life, that the suffering that we're going to go through, the bad things that we see happen, the death and decay and the sickness and just turmoil and chaos that will happen is not the end of the story. It's not ultimate, it's not final. And even if something seems like it ends in death and decay, it will in fact be restored because of the resurrection of Jesus. That is the primary Christian philosophy. It is a belief that evil does not win, bad does not win, sin does not win. It is ultimately overcome, and things will be rightly ordered, even if they appear to end in badness, wickedness, evil, death, and decay. And I think it's ultimately a message of hope, and I think it's a message of defiance for the world that we find ourselves in. I can maybe do another video talking about the Old Testament and basically the philosophical, cultural, and narratival big words or literary backdrop that Jesus entered into as a Jewish person in first century Rome. Excuse me. And the people that he was coming to and the narrative that he was fulfilling for them. I can talk about that. But okay, I was saying something before this. Oh, but ultimately it really is a message of hope and defiance for what we see in the world. For me, I'm very lucky that I've grown up and lived in the United States, middle income, generally haven't had too many struggles in my life. And I haven't really come face to face with things that genuinely feel like they just end in wickedness and in evil. I'm very fortunate to not have that experience. However, the rest of human history and a lot of people in the world, that is not their story. Um, there are wicked people in power. There are good people, relatively speaking, in power, but there are also very wicked people in power who do very wicked things that seem like they just don't have any accountability, no checks, there's no justice, and people die. People die because of the things that they do. Societies are fundamentally changed negatively because of the things that they do. Resources are destroyed because of the things that they do. People's mental health is fundamentally changed for the rest of their lives on this side of eternity because of the things that people do, whether that's people in positions of government, people in business and media, or whether that's parents, a friend, a teacher, um, a boss. Like, people do things that have negative effects that seem like this is the end of the story. And the hope and defiance of Christianity is to look in the face of something like that and say, this is not the end. And not just to say it, but to genuinely believe that, to genuinely believe it and live as if that is true. And even though I haven't really had that many like material struggles in my life, I'm a human being. I have a mind that is capable of finding struggles in anything that I experience. And I think it's a very hard thing to do, to tell yourself that you're facing a situation that genuinely seems like it's just going to stay here, it's going to end, and this is going to be the final word. And to tell yourself that no, this is not the end. Like, it's going to be redeemed, it's going to get better. It just seems like such a crazy thing to do. It seems like a denial of reality. It seemed like delusion. And I mean, that delusion carried the people of the early church straight into their deaths because they believed with everything that they had in them that their deaths were not the end of their story. Their deaths were not the culmination of their life. Their deaths is not what defined all that they were and the experience that they inhabited in their bodies for the time that like they were still alive or their bodies were still integrated. And like, I guess the question that I have, which we can talk about in another video, is what does having and living and truly believing that type of hope do to a human being? Like what does it do to them? What does trying to align themselves with that hope do to them? How does it change the way that they interact with other people, with the world? How does it change the way that they view themselves? How does it change the way that they understand the circumstances that they're in? I think one thing that I can say, it allows you to have a transcendent experience of life where you're not seeing like your present circumstances or your present material circumstances as the definition of what is true and what is ultimate and what is real, which is very hard because we are sensory beings and we experience the world through our senses. But as a Christian, I also believe that we are spiritual and we have spirits and we can transcend what our senses are trying to communicate to us or are trying to tell us. And yeah, I think that's maybe just something that we can reflect on until the next time I come back and talk about um, the philosophy of Christianity. But I like that's just something that I've been thinking about a lot, is the difficulty of genuinely believing in this message that we call the gospel. Um, yeah, it's just the hope is delusional. I wrote about this. I wrote a poem about this sometime last year that I posted on my Substack called Delusional Hope. And I was like, it was a reflection on this whole thing. Like, this is crazy. Like, saying that you believe this is crazy. This is actually crazy. Um, and I know there's so much like other philosophy of Christianity that I could do, that I could touch on. I didn't really go into the philosophy of God or the Trinity or the incarnation, but I wanted to get to the foundation and the root from where all of this began, which is the historical occurrence or the historical phenomenon of the resurrection and the people that committed their lives to the fact that they believed that they saw the resurrected Jesus, and that being the linchpin of everything that we believe as Christians. So, yeah, it's genuinely crazy. Like, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that the philosophy of Christianity is insane. It is crazy. I believe that a dead man got up like from the grave and is no longer dead. Like that is insane. And I don't think we should run away from how insane that sounds, because I think that's the whole point. I think the whole point is that it's crazy. It doesn't seem possible. It doesn't seem real. And the fact that it is real forces us to have to question our entire understanding of reality and how we engage with everything. So yeah, this was just a brush of the surface that is the depths of Christian philosophy. And I'm not going to claim that I know much about Christian philosophy, because I think I said this in one of my other videos, but you can spend your entire life, and I believe we will be spending all of eternity understanding the depths of the gospel and the different aspects of the gospel. And I'm only 24 years old. I haven't necessarily been a Christian for that long. I haven't had that many life experiences to put to the test this thing that I'm trying to believe and see how it holds in the face of the very real devastations that come from being a human being on this earth and being negatively influenced by the opposing spiritual forces. But I do think I have at least a recognition of what the core is and how high the calling is to align yourself with it. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to come on here and talk about that. And until next time, retain hope. That's what we believe. Believe in the resurrection. All right.